Everyone is watching the UFO files. Lights in the sky, leaked documents, official words that sound careful but never complete. Objects no one can fully explain. Images no one can fully dismiss. And a public attention system that knows exactly how to turn uncertainty into gravity. But this video is not about aliens. It is not about whether something is being hidden above us. It is about something colder. What disappears from attention while everyone is looking up? Because the most powerful distraction is not always the stupid one. Sometimes the most powerful distraction feels serious. It feels urgent. It feels historical. It feels like the thing responsible people should be watching. And that is what makes it dangerous. Not because the spectacle is fake, but because attention is finite. While millions of people stare at the sky, other pressures keep moving beneath the floor. Debt does not pause. Prices do not pause. Retirement pressure does not pause. The machinery underneath daily life does not stop just because the spotlight moved. The stage changes. The structure does not. And that is where the real story begins. Attention feels personal. We like to believe we choose what matters, calmly, rationally, independently. But attention is not an unlimited field. It is more like a narrow beam in a dark room. Where it lands, reality becomes vivid. Where it does not land, reality does not disappear. It simply loses psychological weight. This is why the question is not whether people are foolish for watching the spectacle. They are not. Human attention is built to notice what is strange, uncertain, emotional, and hard to categorize. A strange object in the sky is easier to feel than a slow increase in living costs. A leaked file is easier to discuss than a retirement system quietly losing credibility. A mysterious image is easier to share than a structural pressure that has no face. That is the first layer of false safety. You can be surrounded by real information and still not see what matters most. Not because the truth is gone. Because something else became brighter. Because the mind had to choose. And in a world built to compete for that choice, the brightest signal is not always the most important one. The mind does not only follow importance. It follows intensity. A threat-like signal reaches the surface faster than a spreadsheet. A mystery travels faster than a maintenance warning. A strange light travels faster than a quiet bill sitting unpaid on a kitchen table. This is not a moral failure. It is a design feature of attention. Novelty pulls the mind forward. Uncertainty keeps it open. Emotion holds it there. And spectacle combines all three. That is why some events feel bigger than their actual place in daily life. They do not need to be more important. They only need to be more mentally available. This is where modern distraction becomes harder to recognize. It does not always feel like entertainment. It can feel like responsibility. It can feel like awareness. It can feel like staying informed while the foundations underneath you become harder to read. The trap is not that you looked. The trap is that looking began to feel like understanding. And while attention was occupied, the slower signals kept losing oxygen. Not because they were false, but because they were harder to feel in the moment. Visibility is not the same as importance. This may be the central mistake of modern life. If something is everywhere, we assume it must matter most. If something is hard to see, slow to explain, or boring to repeat, we assume it can wait. But many of the forces that shape a life do not arrive as spectacle. They arrive as small changes. A payment becomes heavier. A job market becomes narrower. A retirement plan becomes less certain. A household emergency becomes harder to absorb. A system does not collapse all at once. It becomes less forgiving, one quiet layer at a time. And because these pressures rarely appear dramatic in the moment, they struggle to compete with events designed for attention. Modern systems do not always need to hide information. Sometimes the truth remains public. The report exists. The data exists. The warning exists. But it sits in the dark while something more emotionally rewarding takes the center of the room. That is not secrecy. That is attention hierarchy. A society can keep every file open and still train attention away from the most consequential room. The attention economy did not invent human distraction. It industrialized it. A person can only look at a few things. A platform can test millions of signals to discover what keeps people looking. The result is not always a lie. That would be too simple. Often, the result is a visibility machine that rewards what triggers reaction, uncertainty, conflict, novelty, or fear. Not because every engineer is plotting against your life, but because systems built around engagement learn the shape of attention better than the person using them. They learn what makes the thumb stop. They learn what makes the eye return. They learn what turns uncertainty into another minute of watch time. And slowly, public attention begins to feel self-selected, even when it is being shaped by ranking, repetition, and emotional gravity. This is why important information can be technically available and practically buried. Nobody has to erase it. Nobody has to lock it away. It only has to lose the competition for attention. And once that happens at scale, visibility starts to look like truth itself. The feed becomes a map even when it is only captured attention. Slow pressure has a disadvantage. It rarely announces itself. It does not arrive with a flash in the sky. It does not give you a single image to argue about. It does not trend cleanly. It accumulates. A grocery bill becomes normal at a higher level. Rent feels heavier than ordinary. Debt becomes background noise. Savings become thinner but not dramatic enough to stop the day. Retirement becomes a private anxiety people carry quietly because it is too slow, too embarrassing, or too complicated to explain in public. These are not spectacular pressures. They are atmospheric. They change the room before anyone names them. And because they do not feel like breaking news, they become easy to postpone psychologically. That is the strange advantage of spectacle. It gives attention an object. Slow pressure does not. It gives attention a mood. A mood is harder to share, harder to package, harder to turn into a headline. So the spectacle rises, and the structure underneath keeps absorbing damage in silence. By the time people feel it directly, the pressure has already entered the architecture of ordinary life. The crowd makes attention feel correct. When enough people look in the same direction, the direction itself begins to feel validated. You may not know why it matters. But if everyone is watching, ignoring it feels irresponsible. This is how public attention becomes self-reinforcing. The more people gather around a story, the more the story appears important. The more important it appears, the more people gather around it. Soon the crowd becomes proof. Not proof that the object is the most important thing happening. Proof that attention has already chosen. And once attention chooses, other realities become socially harder to discuss. Nobody wants to be the person talking about household debt while the world is arguing about the sky. Nobody wants to mention retirement insecurity during a spectacle. Nobody wants to explain slow institutional pressure when everyone else is reacting to a mystery. So the public room fills with one object. And the quiet pressures retreat into private life. Not because they disappeared. Because they stopped receiving shared language. The pressure is still real, but it no longer feels publicly real. But slow pressure does not need your attention to continue. That is what makes it dangerous. A system does not ask whether people are emotionally ready to notice it. Interest costs do not pause because the public is distracted. Prices do not pause because the news cycle moved. Household fragility does not pause because the internet found a more interesting mystery. A retirement gap does not pause because people are looking upward. This is the coldest part of the attention problem. Reality does not wait to become narratively convenient. The slow machinery underneath daily life keeps moving even when no one is watching. And because it moves slowly, people often notice it only after it has already changed their options. By then, the pressure no longer feels like a headline. Feels like a life. Less room to breathe. Less margin for error. Less trust in the future. Less ability to recover from a small shock. The spectacle ends. The pressure remains. And the body remembers what the feed helped the mind avoid. This is how a structural problem becomes a private burden before it becomes a public story. Attention became the filter. Not censorship. Not silence. Not always secrecy. A filter. A way of deciding which reality becomes vivid enough to enter public consciousness. This is why the modern world can feel overinformed and underaware at the same time. There is no shortage of signals. There are reports, charts, warnings, filings, hearings, studies, dashboards, and official statements. The problem is not always missing information. The problem is that information has to compete against emotional force. And emotional force usually wins faster. A strange file feels immediate. A slow fiscal pressure feels abstract. A dramatic image feels shareable. A structural risk feels like homework. A mystery creates identity. A warning creates burden. So people do not simply follow truth. They follow the truth that can survive the attention market. That is the deeper reversal. The system does not need to erase every uncomfortable reality. It only needs to make other realities more rewarding to look at. That is why attention is no longer just a personal habit. It is the gate through which reality becomes socially real. Whatever passes through it becomes visible. Whatever fails becomes background. This is where false safety begins. Not when people know nothing, but when they know just enough to feel informed while missing the structure underneath. False safety is not ignorance. It is misallocated confidence. It is the feeling that you are watching what matters because everyone else is watching it too. It is the comfort of shared attention. The comfort of being inside the same public obsession. The comfort of believing that visibility and importance are the same thing. But a society can watch the same object together and still fail to see the pressure below it. A person can follow every headline and still miss the slow deterioration of their own options. A market can flash with signals while the real weakness hides in the assumptions beneath them. This is why the most dangerous distractions often feel important. They do not look like escape. They look like awareness. They do not feel like avoidance. They feel like participation. And that is why they pass through the mind without resistance. Feels safe because the crowd is there. But the crowd can also be looking away together. The danger is not the spectacle itself. The danger is what spectacle makes invisible. This is the line people miss. If the files are real, attention still has a cost. If the files are not real, attention still has a cost. The question is not only what is above us. The question is what stopped being visible beneath us. What pressure did we stop naming? What warning became too boring to share? What personal anxiety became normal because no public language carried it? What structural weakness kept moving while everyone argued about the object in the light? That is why this is not a video about UFOs. It is a video about the price of looking. Every act of attention is also an act of exclusion. To watch one thing is to not watch another. To make one story central is to push another story to the edge. And sometimes the edge is where the real damage is forming. The light can be real. The blindness around it can be real too. And that is the part most people are never trained to measure. After the spectacle fades, the world does not become clearer. It becomes quieter. The screens move on. The crowd moves on. The strange light becomes yesterday's argument. But the slower pressures are still there. In the bill drawer, in the savings account, in the postponed decision, in the uneasy feeling that life has become harder to predict. That is the aftermath. Not a dramatic collapse. Not a revelation. Just the return of everything that never stopped moving. Attention is a spotlight. It can reveal something real. But it can never reveal everything. And the more powerful the light becomes, the darker the surrounding room can feel. So the final question is not whether people should have looked up. Of course they looked up. The human mind notices strange lights in the dark. The colder question is what remained unseen while the light was there. Because when the sky goes dark again, what remains beneath your feet is what you actually have to live with. Not the mystery above you. The pressure below you. That is where false safety ends. Not with an answer, but with the floor becoming visible.